people always want to take a statement and take a piece of a statement and then say, oh man, Draymond said the Cavs aren't playing anybody. They never say Draymond said Cleveland's playing great basketball. You know, so everybody's always chasing the headline, the controversy. It's pretty pathetic that that's what the headline everybody wants. You know, Draymond is disappointed with who Cleveland plays. Do I care who Cleveland plays? I don't understand how all these things are always made so controversial. Not that it alters my daily life. Like, I still go home and have fun with my kids and have a great day. But it's just ridiculous how everybody's always searching for a controversy. So there go y'all headline of the day. Draymond said Cleveland's playing great basketball. Let's see if that one makes it.
Draymond salty, saying the media sensationalizes his comments. Stephen A., take that for data. Do you have a problem with Draymond's comments?
Yeah, I do. Well, yeah, I do. But it's only because I think he lacks a certain understanding and he's not willing to admit certain things. I didn't personalize it because I think to some degree he's absolutely right. You do have folks out there chasing headlines or whatever. But what form of media does not? Has he watched what goes on in the nation's capital? And by the way, it wasn't just when Donald Trump arrived. It's always been the case. When we look at the news and what we see on television, what we read in the newspapers, et cetera, it's always happened. You have athletes themselves. That's exactly what they try to do. I mean, this is a guy that has his own podcast or whatever. Every time he says something, it makes headlines. Why do you think he does it? Because he wants to make headlines. So let's acknowledge that first and foremost. Secondly, and more importantly, here's what I think it really needs to be recognized about Draymond and all the professional athletes today. They are absolutely right when they say sometimes things get a bit excessive and things get blown out of proportion. And I applaud their frustration. I don't blame them one bit. But it amazes me how they don't accept culpability for the role that they play in it. They don't sit up there and say, this person in the media. They generalize. They act like everybody in the media are enemies. And there's plenty of people in the media that are incredibly supportive of them. Who they are, what they are, not just as athletes, but as men. How charitable and philanthropic they are, what their generosity entails, and all of that other stuff in between. They don't want to put in the work to cultivate relationships so they can try to dictate narratives. What they try to do is do it themselves, not realizing on many, many occasions they come across, Max, as incredibly disingenuous. Because what happens is that if you've got media relations department, a publicist, PR folks, managers, and you're insulated by all of those plus hanger-ons and beyond, you're getting on folks for trying to get as close to the truth as possible. And I don't mind you being an athlete that believes your personal life is none of your business. They've taken it a step further. They feel that way when you ask them about basketball. So they play basketball for millions, in front of millions, every day in a public platform that enables them to get paid what they get paid. Then they turn around and they take offense to basketball or football questions that you actually ask them, and you veer away and stay away from their personal business. They've actually gotten to a point where they're upset about anything that you ask them that they don't like, even if it's directly associated with their profession. At some point in time, we've got to call them on that and tell them, put on their big boy pants and grow up and stop whining about what reality is, because you're a part of it. You knew you were becoming a part of it, and you wanted to for the money. This is what comes with it. Suck it up and deal with it.
You're right about that point. That's not what Draymond said in this case, though. I agree with that sentiment generally, using this as a jumping off point.
Yeah, I was saying it generally.
To discuss that. But what Draymond did here, well, first I want to address something. It has always been that way, that the media will parse what you say, and the media will select the most sensational moments and bites of what you say and package that and market that and try to profit from that. It's grist for the mill. But that has been ratcheted up with social media. We are in a clickbait culture, And what we do, Draymond is absolutely right. We put microphones in front of these people. It is mandatory that they talk to the microphones. That's part of their contract with the NBA, really. They have to talk to the press. We ask them pointed questions. The point of those questions is to get them talking so they will say something that we can sensationalize. Sometimes out of context, it will be chopped up to get the most sensational soundbite, and it will be used as clickbait. But that's why we admire athletes like Draymond Green out of proportion to other athletes oftentimes, because in spite of the context in which he's playing and living and operating and existing in his professional life, in spite of what I just mentioned, he'll give you the straight dope anyway. See, it's easy to give the straight dope when it doesn't come at any personal risk. But knowing that every little thing you say is going to be chopped up and sometimes repurposed out of context so that people can make it seem like you meant something that you in fact didn't, that makes it harder to tell the truth. And Draymond is a guy who gives you his truth in spite of that personal risk or personal cost. Stephen A., it's the reason that this show is not for everybody. I mean, in terms of appearing on this show, because this show comes with some personal risk, some personal cost. We know that we don't run from subjects. We deal with them head on. And we understand that when we're telling the truth about them, or at least the truth as we see it, there will be little phrases and moments that can be chopped up and repurposed out of context and used as clickbait. And yet we do it anyway. And that's one of the reasons for the success of the show. And that's one of the reasons I admire Draymond Green. Not because he's wrong about this, but precisely because he's right, and he still does him anyway.
Well, see, here's the problem. Draymond Green is right. He's usually right, but not always. And as a person who has a personal relationship with his coach, Tom Izzo, who I think is one of the great college coaches ever, I love Tom Izzo, and Draymond is incredibly tight with him. He played for the man and what have you. Draymond, I know enough about Draymond to know what a great person he is, and the fact that he could play on my team any day. But just because that's true, and just because he's usually absolutely right and on the money, times that he's wrong, instead of owning up to it, when you take the default position that most professional athletes do in this day and time, and you point the finger at the media, it comes across as a bit weak. I'll give you an example, Max, in terms of how to reverse it. They have the Players Tribune, right? And they have their own podcast and all of this stuff, right? If you got a problem with the media, why don't you invite the media on to challenge them? Because guess what? I believe that sitting in this chair that I'm sitting in, you sitting in the chair that you're sitting in, we have an obligation. Whether it's Draymond, it's Durant, it's LeBron, or anybody else, if they called us to interview us and grill us and subject us to the same kind of scrutiny they believe they're subjected to, we have an obligation to sit up there and say to them, name the time and place, and we will show up. Because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. But they don't do that. You know why they don't do that?
I have a feeling they might after this.
They could sit up there and talk. But at the end of the day, it does come down to facts as opposed to emotion. And on far too many occasions when folks are talking about the media, including the great Draymond Green, they're a bit emotional and not factual enough. Because there are plenty of facts that would point to the fact that the media at times gets victimized because of generalizations as opposed to one person in the media, but 1,000 didn't do what that one person did. But because that one person did it, you want to paint everybody. That's kind of weak.
Well, I think it's been heard now loud and clear from Stephen A. Smith. You name the time and place, he will show up. I'm busy. I'm sorry. Players Tribune, Draymond, I'm busy. But Stephen A. will show up.
I would openly say there isn't a professional. I'm not asking for anything because Lord knows I don't need any more interviews. But there isn't a professional athlete that could have a show and call me, and I'm not going to make the time to show up.
As
much as we talk about them, as much as we talk about them,
show when I would show up.
I believe that
I'm going to
too.
show
You're
up.
both being honest right now.
I'm going to show up.
I understand Draymond's frustration,
You ain't
but
busier than
obviously
me.
It comes with the territory.
But I'd still show up.
Let's leave it there. We know you would show up, and Max would not. The vintage Celtics and Lakers rivalry may be the greatest in sports history, but someone is saying a current NBA rivalry is on par with Boston in LA. We'll explain that coming up. And the Patriots are coming off yet another Super Bowl victory. But find out what Hall of Famer is calling New England overrated and more. That's up next here in First Take.